Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Graham from the School of Teacher Education at National Taiwan Normal University. Welcome to my office hours. All right, so today you want to talk about EMI in university, right?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So, as you know, some of the courses in our college is EMI courses.
Let me define that. I should have defined that when I first said it. So, for those that don't know, EMI stands for English Medium Instruction. And the idea is that the course is entirely conducted in English. So it's different from the bilingual education that we are practicing in primary and secondary schools. EMI is specifically for universities in Taiwan. Okay, continue.
Okay. So, these days, we met questions that is about our peers that he is really good at statistic. However, our statistic classes and EMI courses, he has some trouble in some specific words into English. So he got a really poor statistic score at that class. So how can an university professor prevent these things happen? Even he had a really good statistic knowledge.
I guess I'm kind of curious about the assessments in the course and how the assessments, particularly in a statistics course, how English impacted the score. Because, like what we've talked about before, I think in a previous episode, maybe two or three times ago with your cousin, we need to make sure whether we're talking about EMI or bilingual education, the assessment must be measuring the content, not necessarily the student's language ability. However, the difference between the two scenarios is that in an EMI course, some of the responsibility of proficiency in the language falls upon the student. So the policy at this university is that any EMI course, especially if it's a required course, I think if it's an elective course, maybe there's some flexibility. I don't know about the policy completely, but if it is a required course for a degree and that course is offered through EMI, then there should also be a version in Chinese as well. And so before a student enrolls in that type of class and they choose the EMI course, they need to be sure that they have the prerequisite language ability to succeed in that environment. Now, what is that prerequisite? Well, we don't have a lot of studies on this. There is one study that I know of out of Japan where they very cautiously say that to more or less ensure success in a bilingual class, B2 is probably the line in a university. But what we also know is that if the student's very motivated or very knowledgeable about the subject, and I know this from my case with my students, B1 could be enough to get through it. Okay. If you're below B1, I don't think you're going to succeed in an EMI course in a university. I think that's out of the range of possibilities because the descriptor for A2 is far from sufficient to succeed in that kind of environment. So I would say B2 for your just average motivated student, average knowledgeable student, B1 for the motivated, knowledgeable student in the subject. Okay. So part of that falls on the responsibility of the student. They have to enroll in the right class and don't enroll in an EMI class if they're not going to be successful. Now, if they really want to enroll in it, then maybe engage in some language learning first to get you up to at least that proficiency level before you take that course.
So you mentioned about the prerequisite for a student to attending a EMI courses. So how can student know what their English level is? So should they like attending to a TOEIC or a TOEFL exam to know?
If they want to do an exam, so let me go with that first. I'm not saying they have to, but if they want to do an exam, the TOEIC is not the right choice because the TOEIC is for, as I understand it, business English
Yeah.
or general English. That's not the right choice. For students in a university, for you to know your level of success in an EMI setting, you would need to take something like the academic IELTS or the TOEFL IBT. Those are the ones that are going to measure your academic English. Because if you take the other ones, it's measuring a different domain of English, and that's not going to give you the right information you need. They're not designed for that. But those two tests, the TOEFL IBT and the IELTS academic, are specifically designed to measure your chances of success in these EMI settings.
So is there other ways for student to know their prerequisite?
Well,
Because
if you go into the class, because you can drop the first 2 weeks, if you go to that class and you feel completely lost, drop that class. So I'm going to be honest. When I was an undergrad, science was not my strength.
okay.
I dropped a lot of science classes before I finally got my science credits. I dropped like 3 different ones before I finally found one I could like, yeah, I could pass this. And so that's not a language issue. That's a knowing yourself. Like if you go to the class the first week or two, I remember I signed up for an astronomy class. I was like, I like planets. Cool. And then I went to the astronomy class and it was like astronomical physics. And I was like, I'm out of here. Dropped that class. So I think it would be sort of the same thing in an EMI setting, except you're kind of self-monitoring for language. Like if you go in there and it just doesn't feel right, find another way, find another course, probably a Chinese medium course, to do that. Now, if you go those first 2 days and it does feel okay, but then you find yourself struggling later, well, I guess the good news now is that we do have ChatGPT.
Okay.
Use those resources. Use those resources to help build your language. I haven't explored this much yet, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for these generative AI platforms to serve as tutors. And so I think we're still trying to figure out how best to do that. But I think that's going to be increasingly an option. If a student's struggling, they can use the tool to self-generate assessments in English beforehand to try to build their skills. But of course, again, that goes back to motivation. So you're going to have to be very self-driven. So if you don't have that prerequisite English level and you want to take the course, well, if you're self-driven, it could be fine. But if you're not, it's going to be hard.
So can you give some suggestions to those who really want to take these EMI courses, but they don't have that English proficiency? Maybe give them some useful tools or some ways for improving their listening or speaking.
Well, you're a student. What would be your ideas first?
I think for speaking, just practice more. Practice makes perfect.
And I think our university, correct me if I'm wrong,
Okay.
our university, I think, has like an English chat room, right? Or something like that.
Yeah.
So you got to participate in those kind of groups, because the only way you get better at speaking is by actually speaking.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. You have to speak. So if that means, finding some organized activity, and I think we do have some, or finding a language exchange, especially like here at NTNU, we've got all of these international students in the Mandarin Training Center, the largest Mandarin Training Center in Taiwan. Like there is a whole bunch of opportunities to be able to, you go take an hour, first half hours in English, second half hours in Chinese, both benefit.
What about like listening?
For listening, I think what I would recommend is YouTube. If you're taking a subject like statistics and it's a standard course,
Okay.
like a basic statistics course, there are so many resources online on YouTube. You can just go listen to those videos. And in fact, that, again, going back to assuming that the person that you're talking about here or the scenario you're talking about here, that it wasn't just super, super low. Like we're talking like A2, A1 low, that we're kind of in the B1 territory. Khan Academy. Go on to Khan Academy. I think it's khanacademy.com.
Okay.
They've got a whole library of free lessons in statistics and math and all these different subjects. You can go listen. They'll give you exercises to do. I think that's a perfect resource. So that's the end of today's episode. Thank you for attending my office hours. If you have a question about Taiwanese bilingual education or anything about this episode in particular, send me an email at kmgraham@ntnu.edu.tw. I'll see you next time.